Luther Kane knew better than to linger in places that had already begun to die. But this station, rusting and forgotten like a rotted tooth still anchored in a broken jaw, felt too familiar to ignore. It clung to the fractured remains of a moon, stubborn and hollow, pretending to serve a purpose long since abandoned. He stepped off the lift platform, boots thudding against the grates, shoulders drawn tight against the stale warmth of recycled air. The corridors buzzed with fatigue, overworked electronics sputtering in resistance to decay. No one asked names here. They only looked at what you held or what you could take. 100 years ago, this place might have been a mining hub. Now it was a carcass, picked clean by scavengers and the kind of traders who no longer pretended to be anything else. He moved through it like a ghost in steel bones, metal decks lined with makeshift stalls, plastic tarps, flickering consoles, and salvage hawkers shouting over one another. He wasn't here to pity anyone. He was here for parts, a working filtration coil, an intact solar fuse, enough to keep his ship, the Duskwind, running until he found something quieter, colder, somewhere that didn't echo with reminders. Instead, fate offered him something else. Off the book's cargo, someone muttered behind a curtain of greasy beads. The vendor's eyes flicked to Luther's patch coat. Human compatible, if that's your angle. Bay 9. He should have kept walking. Instead, his boots turned on their own. The noise of the market thinned behind him. His breath fogged faintly in the colder corridor. Vents wheezed and rattled. He walked like a man not yet sure if he wanted to see what waited ahead. Bay 9 was nearly empty. A low hum filled the space, fluorescent strips overhead sputtering in dull protest. Against the far wall, under flickering light, he saw them. A woman knelt, arms wrapped tightly around a child. Her skin was a pale, bioluminescent violet, like frost over night glass. Her long silver hair was tied in a hasty braid, frayed and uneven. She didn't speak, just looked at him with wide, slanted eyes drained of rest. The child in her arms might have been 5 or 6. Same luminous skin, same silver hair, though less orderly. She wasn't still. She stirred, small hands gripping her mother's worn robe. Her eyes were golden, too large for her face, and locked on him. Luther stopped 2 paces away. The woman's voice broke the silence, quiet and exhausted. I have nothing left, only her. She is hungry, he said nothing. She continued, I offer myself in trade. Not for pleasure, only for warmth, for food, for safety. For her, Luther exhaled like something inside him had cracked years ago and was finally remembering how. He crouched, knees aching. What is your name? A flicker crossed her face, Kayla. She answered softly. Is she yours? He asked, nodding toward the child. My daughter. Her arms tightened unconsciously. Her name is Neri. The girl raised her head slightly, voice thin and fragile. If I eat too much, will you throw me away? Luther felt something twist in his chest, sharp and old. He shook his head. I do not throw people away. Kayla said nothing. Her eyes never left his. I am not here to buy anyone, he said eventually. But I have food, heat, a ship. Not much, but enough. You will be safe. Kayla hesitated like she had misheard him, like the word safe had once lived in her and been buried long ago. I am not taking anything from you, he said. Come with me. Please. She pressed her forehead to her daughter's, then stood, slow and deliberate, like sudden movement might break what had just been offered. Her body was too thin under the robe, the childlight in her arms. Luther led them from the bay without looking back. The Duskwind waited on Dock 7, squat and patched, much like the man who flew her. She wasn't fast, wasn't pretty, but she worked. She was his. He keyed the ramp down and waited as Kayla stepped inside. Her eyes scanned every shadow like they hid betrayal. He gestured down the corridor. You'll sleep in the crew showers, clean towels, hot water. Usually Kayla said nothing, but he saw the faint glisten in her eyes. Not tears, just adjustment to a strange environment. One made of kindness. In the galley, he pulled a canister of broth and grain. He didn't cook often, but he warmed it right. Found a clean bowl, even added a pinch of salt. When he brought it back, Kayla was on the cot, Neri in her lap. It's safe, he said as he set it down. Neri reached for it hungrily. Too fast. She choked, coughing hard. Kayla flinched and held her closer. Slow, my light, slow. Luther stepped forward, but Kayla raised a trembling hand. Not to threaten. To protect. Neri calmed, gulped air, and took smaller bites. She is all right, he said. Kayla nodded slowly, her eyes locked on the bowl like it was something sacred. Why, she asked, why are you doing this? He considered lying, but the truth was simpler. He thought of the child he failed years ago, of the colony wall that collapsed, of the silence after her scream. Because I can, he said, then left them alone. In the cockpit, he slumped into the chair, watched the dark through the viewport. The station loomed outside, broken and turning slowly in the black. He closed his eyes, tried not to think about the two shapes behind him, tried not to care. But somewhere in the depths of the station, a man was realizing a certain cargo had vanished, and not the kind people were supposed to steal. The dusk wind hummed steady, like a heart. Later, Luther leaned against the bulkhead outside the crew berth, arms folded. Inside, he could hear the soft rhythm of sleep, one heavier breath, one lighter, no whispers, no fear, just rest. It was past midnight. The lights dimmed to a warm orange. Across the corridor, he should have gone to bed. But he didn't. Kayla had not locked the door. That meant something, either trust or surrender. That thought burned. He rubbed his jaw, stubble rasping under his hand, then walked back to the galley. He heated another pack of protein broth. Not from hunger, from habit, from motion. The spoon clinked softly against the tin bowl. Kyla's voice echoed in his mind. I offer myself in trade, not for pleasure, only for warmth, for safety, for food for her. It wasn't begging. It wasn't bargaining. It was surrender. Quiet, sharp-edged. It said she did not expect to be saved, that she had already accepted she wouldn't be. That was what gutted him. He poured 3 bowls, added a splash of salt to the child's. A memory surfaced. Someone once said salt made bland food feel alive. He was still staring at the steam when they entered. Kayla stepped softly, her feet bare, hair damp. She wore the ship's emergency robe, tied awkwardly. Her skin was cleaner now, the bruises faint but visible. A healing scratch peeked from under her collarbone. She stood like a guest, afraid to ask if she could stay. Neri clung to her robe but did not hide. Her golden eyes scanned the room. She looked better already, still thin, still small, but she moved without that sluggishness from before. She blinked at the bowls, sniffed the air. Luther stepped back and nodded at the seats. It's not much, but it's hot. Kyla guided Neri forward. The girl climbed onto the booth, looked at the smallest bowl, hesitated. Luther spoke gently. You can eat. Neri looked at her mother, who gave a nod. The child began to eat, quickly but not like before. She paused, chewed, even blew on the spoon once. Small changes, but important ones. Kayla took the second bowl, sat across from him. She cupped it in both hands like she was still deciding if it was truly hers. When she took a sip, her eyes closed. Not for drama, just from warmth. Something inside her had loosened. They ate in silence. When Neri finished, she pointed at the small paper packet beside the bowl. What is this salt, just salt? She poked her fingertip in and tasted a grain. Spicy. Luther smiled faintly. Yeah, the good kind. Kayla looked at her daughter, and something shifted in her face. Not joy, not quite, but a beginning. Luther cleared the bowls, rinsed them. The water was cold. Where are you from? He asked. Kayla's fingers brushed Neri's hair. A forest world. We lived near a lake we called Sky Singer, but there was sickness, no medicine, no credits. My mate died first. Neri was too young to remember. She rubbed her daughter's forehead slowly. The girl was dozing again. They called me impure, unworthy of a healer's time. Luther swallowed the urge to say he was sorry. It felt too small. He crouched beside the booth, lifted Neri gently. She murmured in her native tongue and curled into his chest. She's light. Kayla moved, startled, but not to stop him, only out of unfamiliarity. It's all right, I'll lay her down. She hesitated, then let go. That more than anything felt like trust. He laid the girl on the cot. She didn't stir. Kayla lingered in the doorway, unsure. You can sleep here too. I'll take the cockpit. She began to protest. He shook his head. Sleep is a kind of trust. You've earned it. Eventually, she stepped into the room and pulled the blanket over her daughter. Luther returned to the cockpit and stared at the dark, the weight of them still present behind him, soft and breathing. He shut down the ship's ID, killed the tracker, rewrote the beacon with a false name, because someone would come looking, and they were not going to get anywhere near that little girl. Luther woke to the sound of something shifting, metal against metal, a whisper more than a sound, the kind of thing you only noticed when you'd lived too long alone inside a ship and memorized the way it breathed. He stayed still in the cockpit chair, arms folded, one leg hooked over the side, neck stiff from the awkward sleep. It wasn't the discomfort that held him motionless. It was the scent. Warm, earthy, faintly spiced, not coolant, not ionized air or engine grease. Someone was cooking. He stood and followed the scent through the corridor. Bare feet whispering over cold plating. The galley lights were dimmed to a soft gold. There, standing at the cooktop with sleeves rolled back and silver hair tied at her nape, was Kayla. She moved differently now, not like prey, more like someone reclaiming the rhythm of a forgotten morning. Her skin, pale violet and faintly glowing, bore soft bioluminescent marking that had begun to reappear now that the tension no longer buried them. She stirred something in a small pot. He hadn't stocked spices in years, but whatever she had found or brought filled the room with calm. You didn't have to do that, he said, voice low. I know, she replied without turning, but you fed us and I remember how to cook. He stepped closer, arms loose at his sides. Where'd you find flavor in a place like this? She reached into the robe pocket and pulled out a tiny pouch bound with vine thread, dried greens, healing tea, or food. My people use them for both. Luther nodded, quietly impressed. Smells better than anything I've made since the war. She smiled faintly. It's not much, it's something. The quiet returned, but it didn't feel empty. It felt full. Neri padded into the room then, rubbing one eye, hair in wild tangles. She wore one of Luther's old undershirts, knotted at the side to keep from dragging. She blinked up at him. Your chair is loud, he chuckled softly. Yeah, sorry about that. She climbed into the booth seat, folding her legs underneath her. Kyla handed her a small wooden spoon and kissed the top of her head before returning to the pot. Did you sleep all right? Luther asked. Neri nodded. I dreamed about birds, ones with gold feathers. Mama says they're not real, but I saw them. Luther rested his elbows on the table beside her. Maybe they're real somewhere. Kayla brought the pot over and poured the stew into 3 cups. Neri took hers with both hands and balanced it carefully, like it might vanish. They ate slowly. The warmth of it seeped into Luther's chest, not just from the food, but from the rhythm of it. 3 people eating together in quiet. It shouldn't have meant so much, but it did. We'll need to stop soon, Luther said eventually. Supplies, fuel filters. Real food. Kayla looked up, wary. Is that dangerous? Could be, depends where we go. He leaned back against the wall. There's an outpost 2 jumps out. Used to be a mining refit. Still trades, still open. Not picky with IDs. Will they ask about us? They might. But I've still got a few lies left. Nairi looked between them. Are we going to be sold again? The question dropped like a wrench. Kayla's jaw tightened. Her hand touched her daughter's shoulder. No, Luther said, firm. You're not going back to anyone I made sure of. That Neri tilted her head. But what if they want Mama back? Then they'll have to get through me. The girl stared at him for a long moment, like she was trying to decide if he meant it. Then she leaned forward and rested her head on his shoulder, quietly, like it was always supposed to be there. Kayla didn't move. Her breath caught. Neri whispered, You're warmer than the floor. Luther laughed softly. I get that a lot. Kayla looked at him, really looked. Something shifted in her gaze. Not full trust, but a beginning. Recognition maybe. A glimmer of belief that this might not be temporary. Later that day, Luther pulled out his toolkit. The Duskwind had pressure seals that were failing again. The nav beacon wiring was degrading too. Normally, he worked alone. Music low, tools in hand, quiet, efficient. Kyla followed him this time. "You've done this a long time," she said. "Since before the war," he replied. "Ships like this held together when the colonies didn't. Now it's just me keeping her alive." She placed a hand gently on the hull. "She's still strong like you?" Luther looked at her, surprised. There was no flirtation in her voice, just truth, simple and honest. He cleared his throat. "You ever fix things like this? I trained as a healer, but after exile I learned what I had to power conduits, medical ports, anything to keep Neri safe." He handed her the diagnostic lens. She took it, adjusted it like a natural. Read the display, no hesitation. For the first time in years, Luther didn't feel like he was fixing things alone. That night, after Neri had drifted to sleep, Kayla lingered in the galley. She filled the kettle and waited. "Thank you," she said quietly, "for not asking anything. You don't owe me thanks. Most would have asked anyway. I'm not most." She met his eyes and held them. "No, you're not." The kettle clicked. She poured 2 cups and handed one to him. "Drink this, it helps with dreams." He took it. The cup was warm and solid in his hands. For the first time in a long time, he wondered what it might be like to dream of something worth waking up for. Outside, micrometeoroid dust drifted like sparks through a dark sea. Harmless, beautiful, indifferent. Luther sat at the edge of the bunk in the cockpit, half a mug of warm tea at his side. Not piloting, just drifting. Systems on low, no need to move. Behind him, Kayla moved in the galley. Softly, methodically. No waste, no clatter. Just the sound of someone who had learned to survive in silence. When she stepped into the cockpit, she didn't speak. She just looked out at the stars. Her arms crossed, robe brushing her ankles, hair braided again with care. "Thank you for letting us stay. I know you didn't plan for this." Luther shook his head. "I stopped planning things a long time ago. Why? Because nothing ever stayed together. Because I thought I could fix everything, and then watched it fall." She sat across from him, hands in her lap, calm, but braced, like she had something long held to say. "Neri's father, his name was Relin. We grew up together. He worked the high canopy harvest. I studied to be a medicine watcher. He used to bring me flowers he wasn't supposed to pick, just to make me smile." Luther stayed quiet. The words were already on their way. When the sickness came through Valona, it started at the southern pools. The filtration stones had gone bad. No one noticed until it was too late. Just fatigue, then blood, then breathlessness. He got it first, tried to hide it. We had just found out about Neri. He didn't want them to take him from me. I tried everything, roots vapor, heat wraps. But the stronger medicine was reserved only for the high blood families. When I brought him to the healers, they refused, called me impure, said my pregnancy had no bond. They turned us away. He died in our bed, struggling to breathe. He told me not to cry. He didn't want her to hear. The ship was silent. After that, she continued. I was cast out, not even as an exile, as nothing invisible. Luther felt something sharp behind his ribs. That's when I left, worked wherever I could. Freighter holds pirate medbase. She got sick too, wouldn't eat, couldn't breathe. I had nothing left. I offered what I had myself. Not because I was weak, but because I couldn't watch her die. She turned her face slightly. Her markings dimmed again. Luther exhaled. Not because you were weak, he said quietly, but because you were the strongest one there. She looked at him, eyes shining, no tears. I hated myself, but I hated the idea of losing her more. She won't not while I'm breathing. It wasn't a promise born of pride, just a truth spoken like a name. Kayla shifted slightly. And you? What broke for you? Luther looked out at the stars. There was a colony outpost 10 years ago. I was off duty. A hangar collapsed, structural fault. A girl got pinned. I tried to reach her, but I was too late. Her lungs were gone. She didn't even cry. She just looked at me like she wanted me to lie. Say it was going to be okay. Kayla didn't speak. I couldn't save her. And her face never left, not once. When I saw Neri reach out, ask if she would be thrown away, something broke open, or maybe started to heal. They sat in silence. Then Neri stirred in the next room. Soft sounds, not afraid, just sleepy. Kayla rose and turned toward the crew berth. She paused at the door. "Thank you for telling me. You deserve to know," he replied. She smiled, faint like something new and delicate, then disappeared into the dark. Luther stayed in the cockpit. Outside, the dust drifted inside for the first time in a decade. The silence didn't feel hollow. It felt earned. End of part 2. The dusk wind was too quiet, not silent in the way that meant safety, silent in the way a system held its breath before an alarm. The nav console blinked softly in the dark. Luther leaned closer, adjusted the scan filters. There it was again. A masked signal, faint, too steady to be drift debris, too clean to be random. Someone was scanning. His hand hovered over the manual jump override. Not yet. He shut down the display and moved through the ship with fast precision. The hum of life support buzzed in his ears, louder now, like static pressing against his teeth. Kayla stood at the counter in the galley, stirring a pot. Calm, poised, but always listening. Neri sat nearby, doodling on a scrap plate with a stylus, her hair wild and her eyes half-lidded with contentment. "We've been scanned." Kyla turned, sharp but not startled. Consortium. "Not likely," Luther replied. "Not military, not tagged, but clean. My guess is narco." She stilled. "Set the ladle down. They always come back, even if the sail is buried." Nairi looked up. "Are we running again?" Luther crouched beside her. "We're not running, we're preparing." "Preparing to run," she corrected softly. He didn't argue. Kayla's voice behind him was low and focused. "We'll need to bleed heat, redirect venting, rewire the shield grid." "Do it," he said. "I'll kill nav history and erase the last ping." He paused before turning back. "Kayla, if they get close, they won't ask questions. They never do." The rhythm of the ship shifted like a muscle tensing before impact. Within minutes, the duskwind systems were stripped down. No unnecessary signals. Heat diffused. ID signature scrambled. Auxiliary power was fed into false echo bursts. The transponder now read as dead weight, a ghost ship. Kayla worked beside him, sleeves rolled up. Her markings glowed faintly in the cold emergency light. She saltered junctions, rewrote code paths with quick, steady hands. No panic, no questions. Neri helped where she could. She fetched tools, held lights, sat still when told. Her silence was not fear anymore. It was focus. Luther slid under the panel near the relay node, isolating the nav ping. When he crawled out, Kayla met his eyes. "They'll track through more than movement." The sail. "Someone tagged you when Relin died," she said quietly. "There was no food left in our district. The forest was sick. I begged a trader for passage off-world. He offered a contract, said it was legal. Refugee processing. I didn't read the fine code. Didn't know the language well. He said it was labor. Then he changed the terms, double then triple. He brought me to Narco's port, put a chip in my coat lining. They registered me as freight. No trial, no record. Just cargo." Luther clenched his jaw. "I escaped when one of them tried to touch her." She added, "I stabbed him with a broken syringe. Fled into the dock alleys. You were the first face I saw after that." She didn't cry. She didn't need to. Luther moved to the helm. The nav screen now displayed only static. No route. No trace. "Good. We're making a jump, Prel Station. Not on consortium charts. No docking registry. No customs. A place ships go to disappear. Will it be enough? It has to be." Neri tugged at his sleeve. "Do I have to change my name? Only if you want to." She thought for a moment. "I like who I am." "Then we protect that." He fired the jump. Outside, space warped. Inside, gravity rippled for a breath, then settled. They drifted, long enough for the ship to cool, long enough for Luther to feel his pulse even out. Kayla brought him a fresh cup of tea, steeped from her herbs, earthy, calming. She didn't say anything, just sat beside him, their shoulders not touching, but close enough to feel warmth. "She thinks you're home." Kayla said eventually. I'm a broken man in a broken ship. She doesn't care. Do you? The dusk wind floated through the void. No alarms, no signatures, just stars and quiet. Later, Luther stood in the galley, wiping condensation from the coolant panel. The jump had strained the system more than he liked, but it held. Kayla entered. No words, no sound. She moved like she belonged now, like she had learned the ship's rhythm. Neri followed, dragging a blanket. Sleepy, hair messy, peaceful. They had slept, not because they felt safe, but because exhaustion finally gave them permission. Kayla placed a folded shirt on the shelf beside the berth. Her movements were deliberate, gentle. Neri crawled into the nest Luther had built for her in the crash seats. She curled up instantly, asleep in moments. She calls you warm, Kayla said. Not strong, not brave, just warm. Luther looked at her. I think she continued. She's starting to learn what comfort means. He felt it then. Not pain, not joy, just weight. Something real inside his chest. Kayla sat beside the cot. When I was young, before the sickness, Relin used to say safety wasn't a place. It was a person. Luther swallowed. He sounds like a good man. He was. Her voice didn't break, but it frayed at the edges. He died alone, and I couldn't stop it. She looked down at her hands, then stood. That wasn't your fault, I know that now, but it took losing everything to believe it. She drew a breath. Steady now, you stopped me from dying the same way. It wasn't drama. It wasn't flattery. Just truth. The air between them shifted. He didn't speak, just reached out, not to take her hand, just to offer his, palm up, no pressure. Kayla looked down at it. Her fingers moved slowly, carefully, then slid into his. Not a kiss, but something unmistakable. A reply. That night the storm hit. A radiation surge from a nearby gas giant swept across the station's outer orbit. Power grids failed. Communications flickered. The dusk wind groaned under pressure as the shields adjusted. Gravity pulsed. Lights dimmed. Heat levels dropped. Neri screamed once, sharp and sudden. Luther was already moving. He grabbed emergency blankets and bolted down the corridor. Kayla was there already, kneeling, arms around her daughter, whispering a lullaby in her native tongue, software faint, woven with something old. Luther dropped beside them, wrapped the blanket around all three of them, reached out without thinking. She took his wrist. Her hand trembled. She's scared, so am I, he replied, just as softly. They stayed that way, pressed together, breathing in sync. Neri calmed, her face tucked into Kyla's chest. Her fingers gripped Luther's coat like she had always belonged there. She calls you Papa now, Kayla, whispered. Luther looked down at the girl's hand. I don't mind. A long breath passed between them. Do you? She shook her head slowly. I think I wish I'd met you before I forgot what kindness felt like. He turned to her. She was watching him, unafraid, open. Her markings glowed faintly, blue and soft, coming back to life. You didn't forget, he said, you just never had a safe place to show it. She tilted her head, then leaned into him, forehead resting against his shoulder. He didn't move. Outside, the storm battered the hull. Inside, three people sat on cold steel, and for the first time it was enough. The dusk wind touched down with a low metallic groan. Docking clamps locked into place one by one, each thud echoing like the final bars of an unfinished song. The lights flickered as the aging grid tried to keep up. Prell Station didn't offer welcome. It offered something rarer, indifference. They had made it. Luther stood at the open hatch, eyes sweeping the landing bay. It was a broken space, concrete scorched by old burns. A loader droid rusted in one corner, its sensors dead. The whole place smelled like metal and ozone. But it was quiet, and quiet for now meant safety. Neri came down the ramp first. Her boots tapped softly against the grate. She stopped just outside the ship, face tilted toward the ceiling. Artificial sunlight from the overhead panels lit her pale skin in gold. It's warm, she said it barely above a whisper. Luther followed her down, one hand resting on his tool belt. Not for show, just habit. It's fake programmed light. No sky, no sun. I like it anyway. She said, "It feels like morning." Kyla emerged behind them, a bag slung over her shoulder. Her white hair was tied back, but she didn't bother with the stray strands framing her face. For once, she let them fall. Their eyes met. Something passed between them. Not relief exactly, not certainty, but the shared understanding of people who had carried too much weight and still decided to stand. They moved quietly through the hangar, past ships left to rust and others patched like memories. The berth Luther had rented was deep in the lower decks. Out of sight, no foot traffic, just a coded door and a power feed that still obeyed ancient systems. Inside, they took stock. The air was thin but breathable. The water recycler hummed steadily. The lights buzzed, but they held. It would do. Luther checked the hatch seals, double-locked the overrides, ran a diagnostic on the motion sensors. No signals, no consortium sniffers, no pursuers. Not yet. Kyla began unpacking what little they had. 2 shirts, a coiled wire, a dull-edged knife. One drawing Neri had made of a ship with wings shaped like feathers. Neri dragged a crate toward the wall, eyes focused. "What are you doing?" Luther asked. "Making my nest," she replied with absolute certainty. "Ships don't have bedrooms, so I make nests." He crouched beside her. "Need help?" She nodded together. They layered the space with blankets, tarps, and warmth. She set her doll, a simple twist of cloth and wire, atop the pile. It looked like a guardian. Then she turned to him, golden eyes serious. "Can I ask something, anything? If someone bad came and they said they wanted to take me, what would you do?" "I wouldn't let them. But what if they were bigger than you? Then I'd build something bigger than them." She stared at him for a long moment, then climbed onto his knee and wrapped her arms around his neck. "Can I call you Papa all the time now?" He didn't answer right away, just held her, felt the weight of her, small, fragile, trusting. He looked up. Kayla was watching. She didn't nod, she didn't speak, but her expression held something like peace, or surrender, to hope, to stillness, to the possibility that they might not have to leave again. He pulled Neri close. You already do." That night, as the lights dimmed and the station fell into a low, rhythmic hum, Luther sat by the viewport. Outside, the broken moon rotated slowly, its surface fractured, bleeding faint lines of heat. Kayla joined him, a mug of tea in her hands. "She doesn't ask if we'll be thrown away anymore." "No, she doesn't ask if we're staying either." She knows. Kayla handed him the tea. "She built you into her nest." He chuckled softly. "Yeah, I noticed." A pause settled between them. "You're not just safe to her. She said you're home." Luther looked at her. "It's strange. What as I spent years convincing myself I didn't want this, that I couldn't do it again, couldn't lose again. And now I can't imagine anything else." Kyla placed her hand on his chest. Her touch was soft. He leaned into it without thinking. "You didn't find us." She said. "We found each other." The dusk wind sighed, not in pain, not in fear, but in rest. No signals chased them, no code pinged in warning. The hum of the system slowed. Tally stirred once in her nest, murmured something made of sleep. Willie didn't move from his spot beside Kayla. Her head came to rest on his shoulder. Her fingers slipped into his. No declarations, no promises, just warmth. And that was enough. The morning came slow, filtered through the old viewport slats in dusty gold. It wasn't sunlight, but the station's cycle had improved since Luther patched the relay. The room warmed gently, and in the middle of it all, wrapped in a blanket older than any of them, Nairi lay curled with one hand extended toward the floor. Her fingers twitched in a dream, then settled. Luther was already awake, sitting cross-legged on the metal floor, half-buttoned shirt, carving knife in one hand. He smoothed the final edge of a small wooden glider. He had found the wood behind an old panel, sanded it, shaped it quietly, carefully. It wasn't perfect, but it would fly. He set it gently beside Neri's fingers. A minute later, she stirred. Her hand closed over the wing like she had known it would be there. She sat up. "Is it real?" "Only one way to find out." She bolted barefoot down the corridor. Kyla's voice called gently. Boots first, Neri skidded, spun, ran back to pull on the mismatched boots she'd covered in star stickers. Luther followed at a slower pace. Shoulders loose. He passed Kayla in the galley. She was already chopping root on the stove. You didn't have to cook, I wanted to. He looked at her hands. No tremble, no fear, just peace. Neri's laugh rang from down the hall. It flies, it really flies, Luther grinned. Told you, they spent the morning in the hangar. He marked flight paths with a grease pencil. Neri flew the glider with her whole body. Named ships shouted coordinates. Pretended to command a planetary fleet. When she missed a catch and the wing clipped a beam, she gasped. Luther crouched, checked the wing. Every crash teaches us something. Like what? Like how to fly better next time. She beamed, then I'm learning a lot. Eventually, she pulled him into the game. Declared herself fleet captain, named him engineer. They battled shadow serpents in imaginary air. Luther followed orders like they were gospel stabilizers online. Deploy magnetic nets. From the galley, Kayla watched her chin rested in her palm. Her smile was soft, relaxed deeper than anything he had seen before. By afternoon, the station's light dimmed to simulate dusk. In the kitchen, steam rose from a pot of stew. Real dried greens, preserved root oil she had traded for 2 days ago. She ladled it into 3 bowls, one chipped, set them on the crate table. Lunch, Nairi appeared first, sweat on her brow. Glowing with triumph, I saved the base. He fell, though Kyla raised an eyebrow. Luther walked in after her. Heroic sacrifice, very dramatic death. Neri grinned. He screamed. I didn't scream. You definitely screamed. Kayla handed him a bowl. Eat, save your voice for the next battle. They ate quietly, good silence, slurps, spoons against metal, a distant hum of engines beyond the wall. Neri climbed into Kayla's lap. I'm not tired. You don't have to be. Luther stood to clear the bowls, but paused. Watched them. Kayla's arms wrapped around the girl. You know this. This is the best day I've had in a long time. Because of her. Because of both of you. Kayla's eyes softened. You made the ship safe. He smiled. You made it a home. She blinked, then stood still holding her daughter. You're not the man I thought I'd meet when I gave myself away. You're not the woman I expected to carry. They stood close. No tension, no fear. She leaned in and brushed her lips gently against his. Light as breath. Real as gravity. Neri snored softly between them. They laughed, and for the rest of that day, they did not scan for enemies. They did not talk about leaving. They did not look back. They just lived together.